I've always really loved the design of my first generation Moto X. It's a really nice design. It's compact, it's easy on your hand, it's easy to use with one hand. It's got a lot of pros when it comes to design. But people often say that the Indian market is more about specs than design. It's not easy to sell design here, it's easier to sell specs. But it seems like OEMs are, shifting towards the design element slowly and slowly. Recently we saw the OnePlus X. We of course know that Samsung moved towards a more design oriented approach, and now we have the Lenovo Vibe S1. There are two things about this phone. One, it's all about the design, and two, this is the first time that you get to see Motorola's impact on Lenovo. I'm going to explain that later when I talk about the design, and I am going to talk about the design in detail. So talking about the Lenovo Vibe S1, as you can see, it's got a glass and metal build. So it's got glass on both sides of the phone and a metal frame on the side, and looks really premium and nice. If you come to think of this, this is one of the best built phones under 20k right now. A very good thing that Lenovo has accomplished is that I have the white version with me right now, and there is a blue version to this also. So you see that this is not really fingerprint intensive. Of course, the white color makes a difference. Because of the white color, you can't see a lot of fingerprints here, and the fingerprints on the blue color are a little more apparent. But if you ask me, overall the design of the phone is really nice. There's a curved back on this phone, because of which it really nestles into your hand. That gives you that grip that you need. The glass isn't as slippery as you would expect. It's actually quite slippery on the OnePlus X. And even though I really like the OnePlus X design recently, I have to say that I like the Lenovo Vibe S1 more. My only problem with the design here is that from the front, this phone looks really pedestrian, especially in the white version. It's not as bad in the blue version, but from the front it actually defeats the whole purpose of the design on the back and overall metal and everything. It's got really thick bezels on the side. There are thick bezels on the top and bottom, and I think it would probably have made a better choice. It would probably have been a better choice for Lenovo if it had gone with thinner bezels, probably touch capacitive keys instead of the physical keys, allowing them to make these thinner. And I think that would have been a better design choice, but then of course that's just my own opinion. One thing I would like to mention, as I said before, is that this phone has a really Motorola like build. And this is the first time that we can really see Motorola's influence on Lenovo. If you look at the Vibe S1 next to the first generation Moto X, of course it's bigger, it's got a 5-inch display. But the Moto X and the Vibe S1 have a very similar design language. You can see that the philosophy used in the design is the same. It's got the curved back, the camera placement is almost the same. It's got a flash on below it. The Motorola logo has been replaced here, of course, by the Vibe logo. But overall, the curved back and everything, these two phones look very similar. That said, like I said, I really like the Moto X design, so I really like this design also. And from a design point of view, I would have to say that under 20,000, this is the best looking phone in the market right now. Even though you may choose the OnePlus X over it, and I really liked the OnePlus X designs also, but this curved back is what gives the Vibe the edge here. The Vibe S1 just fits better in my hand. It's just as big, it's just as easy to use, and it's just as compact. So that's it about the design. The second element of this phone is of course the display. It's got a 5-inch 1080p display, and to be honest, I find this a little dim. Displays today are a little more vibrant and colors need to pop a little bit, but it doesn't seem to happen in the Vibe S1. But having said that, I will have to mention that this is not really a bad display. I'm not calling this a bad display at all. It's a good display, but if I had to choose between, say, this display and the OnePlus X and the Moto X Play, I would happily go with the other two than this one. And it's not because of the difference between AMOLEDs and IPS and the various kinds of panel. It's actually simply because this display just does not pop. It does not do very well for the phone. It's in comparison to others, it pales. If I am to hold this device as a singular piece of hardware, then yes, this is not a bad display at all. Actually, my bigger problem here is Lenovo's Vibe UI. If you think about Vibe UI, looking at the Vibe UI, my problem with Vibe UI here is that if you look at the overall design of the phone, as long as I have the screen turned off, and I'm turning the phone around in my hand, it looks really good. But the minute I turn on the display and I go into this UI doesn't really flow with the design, you know. It's a very sleek and stylish and suave design, and the UI just does not fit with that. The round icons, I don't know, a Xiaomi like approach or something like an Apple like approach, more transitions into the UI, that would have made more difference. I think simple things like if I pull down the quick settings menu from the top, it doesn't go with the rest of the UI. The rest of the UI is pretty colorful, but you know, this is not just about color. It's a little difficult to explain why I don't like the UI, and you may really like it. And of course, Lenovo's problem is all the bloatware that it loads, but I have to give them points for the fact that you know, most of the bloatware in the Vibe S1 can be removed. So you have Evernote, you have Facebook, you have Skype, you have something called Tap the Frog HD, you have UC browser, but all of these can be uninstalled. So they're not exactly the same category as bloatware. It's just some pre-installed apps that you get onto the phone. And if you have a problem with that, well, that's your judgment, of course. But from my point of view, I think as long as they can be uninstalled, it's pretty okay. My problem with Lenovo's Vibe UI has always been that it's heavy overall and it doesn't really accomplish a purpose. You know, it's, of course, it's supposed to differentiate Lenovo's product from everybody else's, and it does look different from other UIs, but the UI also has to do a lot of task management on the back and you know, things like that. That is something that this phone does not do. It's got 3 GB of RAM, and I'm not running anything on this phone right now. It's just a few apps like the camera, gallery, Chrome and settings. There's just not enough apps. Chrome is a resource intensive app, of course, but as you can see, it's still got about 1.8 GB of memory free, which means that 1 GB is being used by the overall system. And yes, while Android is pretty intensive on the RAM, I have often found that Lenovo's UI is a little more intensive than say a Xiaomi Mi UI, or of course the stock Android designs like Oxygen OS and Moto X Play do take less resources. But even if I talk about UIs like the Mi UI, the Vibe UI still needs a lot of work, and I'm pretty sure Lenovo is going to do that. Moving on to the performance aspect, this phone has a 3 GB of RAM and it runs on the 1.7 GHz Mediatek Octa-core that's the MT6752 processor. And that I think is a very good choice, because many people I know would have gone for the Snapdragon 615 and they would say that Qualcomm is the better one here. But if you really come to think of it, Mediatek's current generation processors are right up there with the Qualcomms of the world. And even though Snapdragon 615's heating issues have now been brought under control, it has been done so by sacrificing performance. And the performance sacrifice is not that huge, but it is still there. And the good thing about the Vibe S1 is that the Octa-core Mediatek performs just as well. And well, I'm not a fan of either of these performances, but from a purely holistic competition point of view, it is a pretty competitive phone when you compare it to say a Moto X Play, or even a OnePlus One for that matter. Even though the Snapdragon 801 on the OnePlus One is a better processor, the fact that this is a newer processor makes all the difference here. So I wouldn't really discount the Lenovo Vibe S1's performance, but yeah, if I had to choose between this and a newer processor, I would of course go for a newer processor. If you're looking for under 20,000 phones though, this phone is right up there with most of the phones in the market. It's not just about the benchmarks. Benchmarks wise, of course, it's behind the likes of the Meizu MX5 and even the OnePlus X in some areas, but on a holistic you know, day-to-day usage point of view, it'll run most of your apps well enough. Unless you're a big gamer, you're not really going to have any problems with this phone. It's pretty good with multitasking thanks to the RAM, and it doesn't really lack anything that a regular user would want. If you're a power user though, yes, Lenovo's Vibe UI and this processor will come in the way of your usage of the phone. Another thing that Lenovo has added here is the dual front camera. So it's got an 8MP and a 2MP camera on the front, and you know, many OEMs have been trying to push this dual camera module, but except Huawei in the Honor 6 Plus, nobody has really used it to its fullest potential. So what the dual camera does here is it allows you to do some post image processing, and to be honest, we have Photoshop, we have a lot of apps that can do post image processing. So yes, it might be a little better here, but then again, it's not really something that you will buy a phone for. The 8MP front camera is the overall quality of the 8MP front camera isn't really good. Under these studio lights, you can see that it's pretty bright, but it's not really something that I can say is a standout feature of the phone. You know, I'm much more taken by the design of the phone. If I talk about simply the first front camera and its overall quality, it does tend to soften images a little bit, and that's of course a conscious choice that Lenovo has made, because when you're clicking selfies, the idea has always been that if you're clicking yourself, your photos will come better when they are a little soft. So images are a little soft. The good thing here is that Lenovo hasn't overdone it. I have seen phones like the HTC One M9 Plus which do soften on the front camera, but they end up over softening it where your images look really artificial. That's not something Lenovo has done. On the back of this phone is a 13MP rear camera. So 13MP, again, if you think about simple megapixel wise, it sounds like a very able camera, and to be honest, it is. In most light conditions, this camera is good. Good enough rather is what I would say. The OnePlus X has a better camera, a very slightly better camera, but a better camera nevertheless. Actually, where the OnePlus X and the Moto X Play will both move way ahead of this camera is in the speed. So the Vibe X1 takes quite a bit of time to focus and shoot and process images, while both the OnePlus X and the Moto X Play do it in less than a second. And that is something that I have to mention. The overall image quality is not bad at all. If you're shooting in sunlight, if you're shooting in indoor fluorescent light conditions, if you're shooting in studio conditions, the overall image quality is really nice, and it does falter a little bit under low light, but then it's not exactly bad either. It's not something that you will not like at all, but yeah, the phones that I mentioned before this are all better on low light than this. If I had to rate the camera out of 10, I would give it something like a 7-ish. So that's not bad at all. It's a pretty good camera on the back of this device. My problem with it, like I mentioned, is that it's slow and it becomes slower when you're shooting in low light. That is a problem. So speaking about the battery, again, the Mediatek chipsets have become better, so it isn't as intensive on the battery on this phone as Mediatek chipsets have been in the past. So the battery on this phone will not last you for a full day. It's got a 2500 mAh battery, and to be honest, most phones today won't last you for a full day. But again, if I had to compare it to its nearest competitors like the Moto X Play and the OnePlus X, no, this battery doesn't last as much as them. It can go very close to the OnePlus X. It can give you about 7 to 10 hours of battery life depending on how heavily you use it, but not more than that. It can't really last you for the full day. It can't give you say 24 hours of battery, and to be honest, most phones today won't give you the 24 hours of battery. Maybe the Xiaomi Marathon M5 will, but then we have to test out that 6000 mAh battery yet. For a 2500 mAh battery, and it is evident that Lenovo has done some resource management on the back end, on the UI level, on the software level, to get as much battery out of this as possible. If you use the low power modes, the battery management modes, then you can get a little more out of this battery, but that's about it. It's not, if you're looking for, say, if you're a very heavy user and your phone tends to run out in a few hours, then yeah, you might have a problem with this phone. But to be honest, if you're thinking 7 to 10 hours of charge, you will get to charge your phone at least once within that, won't you? It does tend to lose battery a little faster than others when you're gaming though, which basically means that, you know, the phone has been let off its threshold and it's being allowed to use as much power as possible, and hence it's using more battery. So depending on how much gaming you do on your phone, it may or may not be a problem. But overall, I wouldn't say it's a bad battery, but yeah, I wouldn't say it's the top of the line battery either. To pass a verdict on the Lenovo Vibe S1, it is of course one of the best designed phones in the sub 20k segment. In fact, I would go as far as to say this is one of the best looking phones in the market right now, period. There are no better looking phones than this and the OnePlus X. These are definitely amongst the best looking phones in the market. And if you really care about the design, you have two choices in the under 20k segment right now. One is this one and one is the OnePlus X. So depending on your own choice, you have to choose between this. Me personally, I like this one more than the OnePlus X if I'm talking purely in terms of design. Why I wouldn't buy the Lenovo Vibe S1 though is the UI. I do not like this UI at all, and I really hope Lenovo can make it simpler and smoother, to be honest. And another reason I would choose the OnePlus X over this one is because the camera is just that slightly faster, and that makes a difference for me. But if design matters to you and you need a very good looking phone that can give you average battery life and pretty good performance, then this one is right up there with the Moto X Play and others. It costs rupees 16,000, so that of course factors into your choice, because the Moto X Play costs 20,000, the OnePlus X costs 16,999. So this is a full 1,000 rupees cheaper than the OnePlus X and a full 4,000, 5,000 rupees cheaper than the Moto X Play. So yes, the Lenovo Vibe S1 is a really nice phone. You can go for it if you want design, a good camera and good enough performance.